Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be tackling a topic that I think is very important to all of us,
Yeah,
and that is resilience.
absolutely.
That amazing ability to bounce back from all those setbacks that life
Mm.
uh, seems to like throwing at us.
Yeah, it never stops.
It never stops,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And adapt to those challenges. But the thing that I find so fascinating about resilience is that it's not just like this magical thing that some people have and others don't. It's a skill.
It is.
And just like any skill, you can actually train it.
That's exactly right.
So we're going to be exploring not just what resilience is,
Yeah.
but also why those setbacks can feel so darn personal sometimes.
Yes.
We'll unpack a little bit of the science behind that, talk about how our brains react,
Mm-hmm.
and why sometimes it feels like those tough times just hit us harder than we expect.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we've all been there. We've all had those moments where we're like, why?
Yeah.
Why is this hitting me so hard? So we're going to kind of break that down and then, most importantly, give you the tools to
Yeah.
help build that resilience muscle.
Yeah.
Some practical strategies that you can use today to navigate those challenges.
Okay, so let's look at why those setbacks sometimes feel like a punch to the gut.
Mm.
Have you ever noticed how sometimes even the small things can just totally send us into a spiral of self-doubt?
Oh, yeah.
It's like our brains are wired to amplify those negative experiences.
Right.
Why is that? What's going on up there?
Well, so think about it this way. Our brains, they're constantly trying to predict what's going to happen next, right? It's a survival mechanism. It's helping us to avoid danger, make decisions. But when something unexpected happens,
Mhm.
like a setback, it totally disrupts that whole system.
So it's like our brains are throwing a mini tantrum
Yeah,
because things aren't going according to plan.
pretty much. Yeah, and when that happens, the amygdala, which is
Yeah.
a part of our brain that's responsible for processing those emotions, like fear and anxiety, it goes into overdrive. It triggers the stress response, floods our bodies with all those hormones like cortisol. And that's what creates that feeling of, being overwhelmed, panic.
Right. So that explains the physical reaction.
Mhm.
But what about that feeling of personal failure? Why do setbacks often make us question our abilities and worth?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's where I think things get really interesting. So our brains are wired to seek out patterns
Right.
and to make connections. So when we experience a setback, we tend to connect it to our sense of self.
Uh-huh.
We start thinking things like, I messed up, therefore I'm a failure.
Right.
And it's like we're creating this negative feedback loop.
Yeah. Our brains are playing connect the dots,
Yeah,
but they're connecting all the wrong dots.
exactly.
And that can be incredibly damaging to our self-esteem and confidence.
It is. And to make matters worse, we often compare ourselves to others.
Right.
We're focusing on their successes while overlooking our own. And social media doesn't really help with this, does it?
Oh, gosh, no. It's a constant highlight reel. It seems like everyone else is crushing it. And we're over here like barely keeping our heads above water.
Exactly.
But here's the thing that I've learned. Everyone faces setbacks.
oh, yeah.
Everyone. It's part of being human. It's just that most people don't broadcast their struggle.
They don't. You're absolutely right.
Right. So
It's so important to reframe that perspective. Instead of viewing those setbacks as evidence of flaws, we need to see them as opportunities for growth and learning. And this is where I think the idea of a growth mindset comes in. I'm
Yeah.
sure you've heard of Carol Dweck's work.
Oh, absolutely. This idea of a fixed versus a growth mindset is so powerful. But for those who might not be familiar, could you break that down for us?
Yeah, so a fixed mindset believes that our abilities are predetermined. You're either good at something or you're not.
Okay.
And this leads to a fear of failure because it's seen as proof of your limitations. On the other hand, a growth mindset sees challenges as opportunities to learn and improve. It's
Yeah.
like saying, hey, I may not be good at this yet, but I can get better with effort and practice.
And that shift in perspective can make all the difference.
Absolutely.
It's like viewing those setbacks as stepping stones instead of roadblocks.
Exactly.
So how do we start cultivating this growth mindset? Is it something we're born with? Or can we actually train our brains to think this way?
Well, the good news is it is definitely trainable.
Okay. Yeah.
It's all about recognizing those fixed mindset thoughts and then consciously choosing to challenge them. So, for example, instead of saying, I'm terrible at this, you could try saying, I'm still learning and I'm going to keep practicing.
It's like replacing that negative self-talk
Yeah,
with a more empowering and encouraging inner voice.
exactly.
I love that. Now, you mentioned earlier that we're going to dive into some practical strategies for building resilience.
Hmm.
Before we get into that, I wanted to just share a quick story. about a guy named Mark. Mark poured his heart and soul into his business for years, building it from the ground up, and then bam, a major market shift wiped out most of his clients.
Wow.
It was devastating.
Yeah, I can only imagine that
Yeah.
would be a major blow. What did he do? Did he throw in the towel?
He definitely felt that urge. I mean, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah.
He was heartbroken,
Huh.
frustrated, and honestly pretty scared. But here's the thing about Mark. He had this incredible ability to pick himself up, dust himself off, and find a way forward.
Wow.
And that's exactly what he did.
So he didn't let that setback define him. He found a way to bounce back.
Exactly.
That's resilience in action.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to hear how he did it. And more importantly, what can our listeners learn from his experience?
Well, that's what we're going to unpack as we explore these practical strategies for building resilience.
Mhm.
We're going to see how Mark actually applied these strategies in his own life and how you can use them to build your own resilience muscle, no matter what challenges you're facing.
I love it. Sounds like we're about to get into the really good stuff. I'm excited to dive in and explore these strategies, and I think our listeners are going to be surprised at just how much power they have to bounce back from anything life throws their way.
Awesome. Let's do it. Okay, so we've talked about the science behind setbacks and how our brains can sometimes work against us. We've also touched on the power of a growth mindset. But now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How do we actually build this resilience muscle? What are the actionable steps we can take?
Yeah, this is where it gets really exciting because resilience isn't just this abstract concept. It's something that you can actively cultivate through specific strategies. Think of it like a toolkit that you equip yourself with to navigate those challenges.
Okay, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So what's in this resilience toolkit? What's the first tool we need to grab?
The first and arguably the most important tool is emotional awareness. So when you face a setback, that natural instinct might be to push those negative emotions down, to pretend that everything is okay, but that can actually backfire.
So you're saying it's okay to not be okay, to acknowledge those feelings of disappointment, frustration, or even anger.
Exactly. Trying to suppress those emotions only makes them fester and grow stronger. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. Eventually, it's going to pop back up with even more force.
Yeah.
So instead, allow yourself to feel those emotions, process them, and then move through them.
That makes sense. It's like giving ourselves permission to be human, to experience that full spectrum of emotions, even the uncomfortable ones. But how do we actually process those emotions in a healthy way?
Well, there are a lot of great tools for this. Journaling can be incredibly helpful, even if it's just a few minutes of free writing, just to get those thoughts out of your head and onto paper. Talking to a trusted friend or family member can also be incredibly therapeutic. Sometimes just voicing those feelings out loud can help you to gain perspective and release some of that pent-up energy.
Right. And if those options aren't enough, there's always the option of seeking professional help from a therapist or counselor. There's absolutely no shame in asking for support when you need it.
Okay, so emotional awareness is tool number 1. What's next?
Tool number 2 is all about focusing on what you can control.
Okay.
So when you're in the midst of a setback, it's easy to feel like everything is spiraling out of control. You start catastrophizing, imagining all the worst-case scenarios, and that can be incredibly paralyzing.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well. It's like that what-if spiral. That just takes you down, down, down.
Exactly. But the key is to shift your focus to the things that you can actually influence: your actions, your reactions, your attitude. You can't control those external events. But you can control how you respond to them. Remember, Mark, our resilient entrepreneur,
Yes.
after that initial shock of losing his clients, he didn't dwell on what he couldn't change. He focused on what he could control, which was his response to the situation.
Right. He didn't waste energy lamenting the market shift. He channeled that energy into figuring out how to adapt and move forward. It's like that famous serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Perfectly said. And that's the essence of resilience, isn't it? It's not about being passive or giving up. It's about taking ownership of your situation, focusing on what you can influence, and making choices that empower you. So to put this into practice, the next time you're facing a challenge, ask yourself, what aspects of the situation are within my control? What actions can I take to improve the situation, even if it's just a small step?
Like taking back your power, right? Even in the face of adversity, you still have agency, you still have choices. Okay, I'm loving these tools so far. What's the next one we should add to our resilience toolkit?
Tool number 3 is all about reframing the narrative.
Okay.
This one is super powerful because It's
Yeah,
about shifting your perspective, changing the way that you think about the situation.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this reframing business.
So instead of viewing a setback as a dead end or a personal failure, try to see it as a detour, a learning experience, even a hidden opportunity. Remember the stories we tell ourselves about our experiences shape our reality.
So it's about rewriting that internal script, replacing that negative self-talk.
With a more positive and empowering narrative.
Exactly. For example, instead of saying, I failed, you could say, I learned something valuable that will help me succeed next time.
Hmm.
It's a subtle shift, but it can make a huge difference in how you feel and how you approach future challenges.
It's like turning those perceived failures into stepping stones for growth. Instead of seeing them as roadblocks, you're seeing them as part of the journey, as opportunities to learn and evolve.
And this is where Mark's story really shines. Remember when he lost most of his clients? He could have easily spiraled into despair and self-doubt.
Yeah.
But instead, he chose to reframe the narrative. He asked himself, what can I learn from this experience? How can I use this setback to make my business even stronger? He didn't just accept defeat. He used that setback as fuel to innovate, to adapt, and to ultimately create an even more successful business. That's incredibly inspiring.
Okay, so we've got emotional awareness, focusing on what we can control, and reframing the narrative. What's the next tool in our resilience toolkit?
Tool number 4 is all about building a support system.
Okay.
Resilience isn't about going it alone. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Having a strong network of supportive people can make all the difference in the world when it comes to navigating challenges.
I totally agree. It's like having a team of cheerleaders in your corner, reminding you of your strengths, offering encouragement, and helping you to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
And it's not just about receiving support, it's also about giving support
Yeah.
when you help others. It actually boosts your own resilience, it takes the focus off your own problems, and it allows you to connect with others on a deeper level. It's like that saying, helping others is the secret to happiness. And it makes sense, right? When you focus on making a positive impact on someone else's life, it shifts your perspective and reminds you of your own capabilities and strengths.
Exactly. And let's not forget about Mark. He didn't isolate himself when his business hit a rough patch. He reached out to his network of mentors, peers, and friends. He sought advice, support, and encouragement, and that played a huge role in his ability to bounce back.
It's a reminder that we're not meant to go through life's challenges alone. There's strength in vulnerability, in reaching out and asking for help when you need it. Okay, we've covered 4 amazing tools so far. What's the final tool in our resilience toolkit?
The fifth and final tool is self-care.
Okay.
This one is often overlooked, but it's absolutely essential for building resilience. When you're stressed and overwhelmed, it's easy to neglect your own needs. You might skimp on sleep, eat poorly, or stop exercising. But that only makes you more vulnerable to the negative effects of stress.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you're not taking care of yourself, you won't have the physical or mental energy to deal with challenges effectively.
Exactly. Self-care isn't selfish. It's about replenishing your resources so you can show up as the best version of yourself. This could include things like getting enough sleep, eating nutritious foods, moving your body, spending time in nature, or engaging in activities that bring you joy and relaxation.
Right. It's about prioritizing your well-being, both physically and mentally. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be as simple as taking a few minutes each day to meditate, listen to your favorite music, or take a relaxing bath.
And remember, self-care looks different for everyone. What works for one person may not work for another. The key is to find activities that nourish your soul and make you feel good. And here's a little secret. Self-care can actually be fun. It's not just about green smoothies and kale salads. It's about indulging in activities that bring you joy and make you feel alive.
So it's about finding that balance between taking care of your responsibilities and taking care of yourself. And it's about giving yourself permission to enjoy life, even when things are tough.
Okay, I'm loving this resilience toolkit. It's packed with practical and actionable tools that anyone can use.
And remember, building resilience is a journey, not a destination. It's a process of continuous growth and learning. You don't have to master all these tools overnight. Just pick 1 or 2 that resonate with you and start incorporating them into your daily life.
And be patient with yourself. Just like building physical muscle, building resilience takes time and effort, but the rewards are well worth it.
So, before we wrap up, I want to share a quick exercise that you can use to put these tools into practice. It's called the 3-step reset.
Oh, I love a good exercise. Tell me more.
It's super simple, but incredibly effective. The first step is to pause. Whenever you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, or stuck, take a moment to just stop and breathe. Close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and bring yourself back to the present moment.
It's amazing how much of a difference a few deep breaths can make. It's like hitting the reset button on your nervous system.
Exactly. The second step is to reflect. Ask yourself, what's going on right now? What am I feeling? What are my thoughts telling me? And most importantly, what can I learn from this situation?
It's all about creating that space for self-awareness, for understanding what's triggering those feelings of stress or overwhelm.
And the third and final step is to act. Choose one small action you can take to move forward, even if it's just a tiny baby step. It could be as simple as sending that email you've been putting off, taking a walk to clear your head, or reaching out to a friend for support.
It's all about taking action, even if it's imperfect action. It's about breaking that cycle of inertia and creating momentum. So there you have it, the 3-step reset. Pause, reflect, act. It's a simple yet powerful tool that you can use anytime, anywhere, to shift your mindset and boost your resilience.
And the more you practice it, the more natural it will become. It's like training your brain to respond to challenges in a more constructive and empowering way.
Yeah, it's like building that mental muscle memory for resilience.
Yeah.
And speaking of building, remember Mark?
Yeah.
He didn't just magically bounce back from that business setback.
Yeah.
He actively used those tools that we've been talking about.
Right. He acknowledged his emotions. He allowed himself to feel that disappointment and frustration, but he didn't let those feelings paralyze him.
Right.
Instead, he shifted his focus to what he could control. He analyzed the situation, identified areas where he could improve, and started taking action.
And he didn't isolate himself. He reached out to his network for support, advice, and encouragement. It's a great reminder that we don't have to go through tough times alone. There's strength and vulnerability in asking for help when you need it.
Absolutely. And perhaps most importantly, he reframed the narrative.
Yeah.
He didn't view that setback as a failure, but as an opportunity to learn, adapt, and grow. He used it as fuel to create an even stronger and more resilient business. His story is such a powerful example of how these tools can be applied in real life to overcome challenges and achieve success. And it reinforces that resilience isn't about being immune to setbacks. It's about having the tools and the mindset to navigate those setbacks effectively and emerge even stronger on the other side.
Exactly. It's about embracing those ups and downs of life, knowing that challenges are inevitable, but they don't have to define us. We have the power to choose how we respond, how we learn, and how we grow from those experiences.
And that brings us back to that beautiful quote about the oak and the willow. The oak fought the wind and was broken. The willow bent when it must and survived. It's a powerful metaphor for resilience, isn't it?
It really is. The willow's ability to bend and sway allows it to withstand even the strongest winds. It's a reminder that flexibility and adaptability are key components of resilience. It's not about being rigid or unyielding, but about having the capacity to adjust to changing circumstances, to bend without breaking.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into resilience, what's the one key takeaway that you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think it's this. Resilience is a skill that can be learned and cultivated. It's not about being superhuman or never experiencing setbacks. It's about equipping yourself with the tools and the mindset to navigate those challenges effectively and emerge even stronger on the other side.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. Lean on your support system, prioritize self-care, and just keep practicing those resilience-building strategies. You have the power within you to face whatever comes your way and create a life filled with purpose and meaning.
And remember that quote about the willow. When life's winds blow, choose to bend, adapt, and thrive.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into resilience. We hope you found it insightful, empowering, and inspiring. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep diving deep.